But I ain't gonna lie, I wasn't trying to run it. I wasn't trying to see Lil B, folk. I ain't gonna lie, folk. Not even on those scary shit. It's just like, when you see Lil B, folk, you better have your gun. You know what I'm saying? Like, you gotta see Lil B, because you know what time it is with him. Like, if I run into Lil B, it better been because I was in his hood op shopping. Like, you don't want to run into Lil B in your hood, folks, because you know what he on.
I hung with that every day, like before all that was happening. And then after my baby daddy got that DM me.
Lil B.
Yeah, he was like, man, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Link up with me, I want to talk to you. Ooh, he was gonna woo me.
You knew that was back though.
KI's name also found its way into those speculations that implied she, along with a shooter by the name of Lil B, were the ones who targeted J Money.
Right now, we're on the block where J Money got gunned down at.
Lil B know what he was into, man, and he always said, man, one of his favorite lines was that the ops not gonna kill me, man, the cops are. Cause they scared of me, the ops. That's what he always used to say. So, and the cops end up killing them too.
Lil Durrell was on FaceTime with Vaughn and Troy. They on death row. Lil B flipped the camera around. He like, yeah, y'all know where I'm at, right? He come tee up for your homie. You know where I'm at. Woo. He standing right there where J Money got nothing. Y'all know where I'm at. Oh my dear, the ops is 12. I don't give a nobody say. The moment bro and them showed V-Roy and them where they was standing there. And the crazy part about it, Lil B ain't even had no pipe on him. And Lil Rock the Don had his pipe. For them standing out there for like 10 minutes talking to Shorty and them like, damn, y'all ain't gonna come slide for y'all homie. Just hit that. Boom, for them to take off.
A massive police presence between Eberhard and Rhodes on 63rd. Patrol cars, blue lights flashing after a police-involved shooting.
He got shot 7 times on Rhodes, right there by the police.
Friends say 19-year-old Rasan Shah had just left them to get something to eat.
He was running through the alley with no gun or nothing, because he just left us. So we know he ain't had no gun. The police shot him unjustified. Too many times in his back. He ain't do nothing, man.
Lil B, EBT.
And we had to beat this nigga ass in that bitch, because he bust Lil B shit open in that bitch. They go across Lil B shit with the Remy bottle, split folks shit open in that bitch. But it ain't end well for them. On my daddy, we stomped Shorty head through the stage. We broke the stage. We was in that bitch beating his ass. Oh, bro. Then you gotta think about a lot of the guys big as hell. Big Weedy them in that bitch. He try to run, Big Weedy block him off from getting through the door. We kill him. He stomping his head to the stage. He trying to get out there, bitch. We in that bitch, break the bar. RP to King Lil B, right? Let me tell you why I say this. Cause he was a real GOAT at what he did. And he did what he did and he took it to the heart. He was in that shit for the long haul. And the police knew it. The police knew they had to kill my dog. When the police know you a threat and they can't get nothing on you, what you think they gonna do to you? They gonna eliminate the problem. It's been going on like that for decades. Lil B and the people before Lil B, the menaces to society.
Wild stories about Lil B. Did you know him?
Do I know him? The little mother robbed me. Let's start there. Let's start
Stories
there.
about Lil B putting the wig on, popping dude. I was on the street that day. The rumors about Lil B. You ever meet him? I definitely met him. Like, okay. Bro, he was a savage.
No BD, he had smoked you on phone now.
Rayshawn Shaw, better known as Lil B from EBT.
Was the gap in their security they had not thought to close. This is how the nickname was earned. This is the chapter where the method became legend. Beat 2. The evolution of the method coming into the later stretch of his activity, the period that sources across the vault consistently place in 2012 and into 2013 before the end. The methodology that Rasan Shah had built through 2011 had already been tested and confirmed. The patience worked, the dumpsters worked, the early morning windows worked. The discipline of staying off social media, of not building a brand that gave the enemy something to work with, of moving without the announcement that made most of his contemporaries easier to counter. All of it had produced a year in 2011 that put 4 bodies on the board with 0 murder convictions and a police officer's wound in the file. The question that comes after a year like that is not whether the method is working. The question is whether the environment has adjusted to it. Whether the blocks he had been hitting had incorporated the knowledge of how he moved into their daily operations. Whether the people who had been caught slipping in dumpster windows and 8 in the morning frames had passed that information forward to the people who came after them. The answer was, they had. To the extent that information moves in those streets, and it moves fast, it moves across crew lines through funerals and conversations and the shared geography of the South Side, the word on how Lil B operated had circulated. People knew about the dumpsters, people knew about the early hours, people knew the small, quiet figure was the threat. Knowing about a method and having a counter to it are different things, but the awareness was there, which meant the method had to evolve. He was not going to stop sliding. The idea that the awareness of his method would produce a pause in his activity, a period of recalculation and recalibration, is not supported by anything any of the sources say about how he operated. He was not built for pauses, but the method had to find the gaps that the adjustment had left open. A wig was one of the gaps. Beat 3. The logic of the disguise. The disguise was not a costume, it was a solution to a specific operational problem. The operational problem was recognition, on a block that had been hit by Rasan Shah, on a block where people had survived being in the same geography as him or had buried people who had not. The alert was calibrated to a specific physical description: small, male, quiet, moving with the specific body language of someone who knows exactly where he is going and has already decided what happens when he gets there. The wig and the trench coat attacked the description at the first filter: male. Before anyone on the block ran through the rest of the checklist: height, build, movement pattern, whether the person walking toward them had the specific quality of stillness that people who had been around him described. The first filter was already pointing in the wrong direction. Female, not the threat. Continue normal operations. He understood the cognitive sequence his targets were running. He had grown up around them. He had run with some of them. He knew how the alert worked because he had been inside the same environment that built it, and he found the specific input that would route the alert into the wrong category before it reached the point where the rest of the checklist became relevant. The trenchcoat handled the second problem: what he was carrying. The weapon that, if visible, would reactivate every filter the wig had already bypassed. The trenchcoat was not wardrobe, it was concealment, a container for the thing the disguise was buying time to deploy. Cam Capone and Big Duger addressed the specific intelligence behind the operation on camera. They were not presenting it as a funny story, the wig as a punchline, the lace front assassin as a joke nickname. They were presenting it as evidence of a person who was thinking about problems at a level of specificity that most people in those streets were not matching. The solution was creative, because the problem was real. He needed to get onto that block. He needed to get past the people on it. He needed the moment of recognition to come after the moment of no return for the people he was targeting. He solved all three problems with a wig and a trench coat. Beat 4. The walk 8 in the morning, the block in the corridor, the figure in the wig and the trench coat. He walked through it. The accounts that exist across multiple sources do not map every step of the approach with consensus. The exact block, the exact geography, the precise number of people he passed before the moment came. What they do agree on is the central fact: he was on that block, in that disguise, in a window that should have been safe, and he was not recognized until it was too late to matter. The walk is the detail that accumulates meaning the longer you sit with it. Not the shooting, the walk. The sustained performance of moving through an enemy block as a woman, maintaining the body language, maintaining the pace, not surfacing any of the tells that would have collapsed the disguise before he reached the position he needed. For however long the approach took, he was not nervous. That is the thing that comes through in every account of every operation he ran. The patience in the dumpster was one version of it. The walking back out the same night he got shot was another version. The walk through the block in the wig and the trenchcoat was a third version of the same fundamental quality. Whatever the feeling is that makes people hesitate, the recognition of risk, the recalibration of the body when the body understands it is in danger, he either did not experience it or he experienced it, and it did not produce any output that was visible from the outside. He walked through the block and they did not see him, then they did. Beat 5. The nickname, the lace front assassin. The name spread across the South Side after the incident. Not as a formal title, nothing in those streets is formally titled. As the shorthand that circulates when something happens that requires a new vocabulary to describe it. When a person does something specific enough and unusual enough that the existing inventory of descriptors is not sufficient, the street produces a new word for it. Oscar the Grouch was the dumpster. The patience, the willingness to sit in refuse for hours waiting for a position that most people would have decided was not worth the wait. The lace front assassin was the disguise, the cognitive attack on the recognition system, the specific creativity of deploying a tool, a woman's wig, that no one had thought to incorporate into the operating protocols for the block because no one had thought they needed to. Both names pointed at the same quality: not aggression, not recklessness, not the volume of the activity or the size of the reputation. The names pointed at the intelligence behind the method, at a person who was thinking about the problem he was solving and then engineering a solution rather than running the standard playbook. FBG Dutchie said it when he was describing the broad shape of what Lil B was. He said this was not a regular type. The names confirmed it from a different angle. A regular type gets a regular name: active, solid, official, thorough, the adjectives that circulate for people who are doing the work without the specific inventiveness that requires its own vocabulary. Oscar the Grouch was not a regular name. The lace front assassin was not a regular name. They were the names for a specific person who had found specific solutions to specific problems that the regular playbook had not anticipated. The block that morning found out what the name meant in real time. Beat 6. The enemy's accountium. Fei talked about him on camera. That account is the most significant in the vault for this chapter because it comes from the other side. Not a 2IMB member speaking about a former ally, not someone from CC or 600 who had heard the story secondhand. Fei was on the side that was receiving what Rasan Shah was doing in 2011 and 2012. The account of what it felt like to be on that side of the operation carries a specific weight that no account from his own side can reproduce. What she described was not a beef that felt manageable. What she described was a sustained, patient pressure from a person who had been inside their circle and understood their geography, and was using that knowledge in a way that had no obvious counter. She talked about the reality of knowing he was out there, not as an abstract threat somewhere in the city, but as a specific presence in the specific geography that the block occupied every day. She did not undercut the account or minimize the threat in the way that the other side's narrative is sometimes softened in these kinds of interviews. She said what it was. He was on them, consistently, with the specific knowledge that came from having grown up inside that crew. The wig story did not come from Fei directly. That detail surfaces more consistently in the accounts from the EBT and CC sides, but the period she described, the sustained, creative, relentless pressure on TIMB blocks through 2012, is the context in which the wig operation sits. The disguise was not a standalone event, it was one iteration of a methodology that was hitting that block and the blocks around it in multiple forms across multiple months. She saw it from the receiving end, and what she described was consistent with what the people on his side described as the sending end. Beat 7, the accumulation. By 2012, the accumulation was visible from every angle. The CPD files were stacking. The TYMB blocks had absorbed losses that Fei and others would reference years later in terms that made clear the damage was structural. Not just individual losses, but the kind of sustained pressure that changes how a crew operates, where they stand, what routes they use, which windows of the day they treat as safe. He was still quiet, still not on social media, still not building a brand. The wig story was circulating on the street, but it was not on Twitter because he was not on Twitter. The lace front assassin nickname was in the corridor, but it was not in a rap lyric because he was not rapping. He was a ghost in the public record and a fully documented subject in the CPD file, and a living legend on the specific Southside blocks that had direct experience of what he was doing. Cam Capone and Big Duger, talking about the period from the CC perspective, described the way the reputation worked. You knew who he was. If you were in that geography, if you were connected to those crews, the name was not new to you. The stories were not surprising. You had heard something. Maybe the dumpster story. Maybe the early morning windows. Maybe the wig. The stories fit together in a way that made sense because they all pointed at the same method. What they also described was the awareness of a clock. He was 19 in 2011. He was still 19 when the year ended. He would turn 20 in June 2013. The clock that exists for every person running at that pace in that environment was running. The law was building files. The enemies were adjusting. The activity level that produced 4 bodies in a year was not sustainable indefinitely. Not because he was going to stop, but because the math of sustained activity at that level in that environment has a terminal outcome that arrives on one of 2 schedules, the law or the street. He was not thinking about the clock, that much is clear from every account. He was thinking about the next operation. Beat 8. What came after the wig? The wig story is the most famous story about Rasan Shah. It is the story that the lace front assassin nickname crystallizes. It is the story that most people lead with when they are explaining to someone who does not know who he was, what made him different from the general category of active drillers on the South Side in that era. But it was not the last story. It was not the culmination. He kept going after the wig. He kept sliding. He kept building CPD files. He kept being the name that the blocks on the receiving end of his attention had to account for in their daily operations. The accumulation that was building through 2012 and into the early part of 2013 was building toward an endpoint that the sources all circle around with the specific gravity of people who know how the story ends and are describing the period before the ending with the awareness of what was coming. Boss Crizzy and A Humble Soul talked about the final chapter, the gangway, the police, the specific circumstances of how it ended. That is the last episode. But the wig is the chapter before the last chapter, which means it is the chapter where the full shape of what he was is visible before the shape closes. He put on a wig and walked through an enemy block at 8 in the morning and shot it up in broad daylight. He earned a nickname that nobody else in the history of the South Side had earned because nobody else in the history of the South Side had done the specific thing that name described. He was still 19. He would not turn 20. The last chapter is the gangway. Beat 9. Human weight. Here is what the wig adds up to. A man who had already proven in 2011 that he could do the work at volume, 4 bodies, a cop shot, back out the same night he got hit, decided in the period that followed that the volume alone was not the answer. The environment had adjusted, the blocks he was hitting had incorporated the knowledge of how he moved. The alert was calibrated to his description, so he changed the description. He put on a wig, he put on a trench coat, he walked through the block at 8 in the morning in the window when people had decided the day was safe. He walked past people who were looking for him, who would have recognized him, who would have acted on the recognition, and they did not see him because the first filter sent the alert in the wrong direction. By the time the correct filter caught up, it was already past the moment when it was useful. The Lace-Front Assassin, Oscar the Grouch, 2 nicknames for one person, both of them pointing at the same thing, not aggression, not recklessness. Intelligence applied to a specific problem in a specific environment in a way that produced outcomes the environment had not prepared for. He was born in the Calumet building. He grew up inside Twimby. He absorbed a violation for something he did not do. He switched to EBT. He built a year in 2011 that the South Side is still talking about. He put on a wig and shot a block up at sunrise. He was 19 years old. The CPD had 32 files on him. The gangway was coming. The last chapter closes the season. We, the mob, drop your verdict in the comments. The wig, the dumpster, the early morning windows. Is there another name in Chicago drill history who brought that level of creativity to the field? Or was Rasan Shaw operating in a category entirely his own? Like the video, subscribe, the vault keeps building.